Nightbreed was originally released in 1990 and was written and directed by horror legend Clive Barker. It was based off his novella Cabal, and unsurprisingly, the film followed the same story beats and reflected Barker's unique vision. Barker was unhappy with the original theatrical cut, citing the standard grumblings of studio interference. Years later, the director's cut was released. It's been nearly 30 years since I've seen the film, so I'm excited to revisit this classic from my youth. As a huge fan of Barker's writing and an equally enthusiastic fan of Hellraiser, I was thrilled to see Nightbreed in its original theatrical run. While specific memories are a bit murky, I do recall feeling somewhat ho-hum about the film. I recall being underwhelmed by the film's dialogue, somewhat apathetic about the casting, and generally disappointed that the movie lacked the magic of Barker's source material and the visceral thrill of Hellraiser. But let's check out the director's cut, see if it bolsters my opinion any, and see how the film is aged. So dim the lights and let's dissect Nightbreed, the director's cut. From the opening credit, Danny Elfman's bombastic score assaults the viewer with a barrage of whimsy. We all love Elfman's work, obviously. The fact that he created every note of music, including what we hear later in the honky-tonk bars, validates his status as an inspired musical genius. But damn, slow your roll, Danny. We've only seen some cave paintings and hipster pets, and the score is already an orgiastic assault of whimsy. Throughout Nightbreed, the score is, well, it's a lot. Instead of a slight elevation in tension or a music sting, we get a carpet bombing of woodwinds. Calm down, soundtrack. You don't have to try so hard. This approach worked great for films like Beetlejuice or Nightmare Before Christmas, but this ain't those flicks. In my experience, director's cut often translates to want to see a bunch of stuff we trim for a reason, because it made the movie drag, doesn't add a trace of plot or character development, and generally bores the audience. Well, here you go. At the movie's 15-minute mark, the only notable additions are a scene of the lead characters dry humping in their tighty-whities, and then some country karaoke. Enthralling. The revelation that couples have sex and that our main character, Laurie, has horrific taste in music does not equal rich character development. Craig Sheffer's character, Boone, looked like the middle brother of Glenn Danzig and John Stamos in this movie. 1990 was an awkward year for films, especially horror. It felt like there was a conscious effort to create distance from the silly campiness of the 80s. What we got was often just as campy, only it suffered from pretentious delusions of grandeur. The movie finds its stride when Boone shows up in Midian and we meet two of the monsters, Narcissus, played by Hugh Ross, and Kinski, played by Nicholas Vince. The dialogue and performance is fantastic, especially Ross. Maybe it's a contrast of the lead characters, who are honestly a bit bland and unlikable. I never could connect or sympathize with Boone, and that goes double for his love interest, Laurie. That's problematic when those two are the romantic leads of the film. Accidental comedy ensues when Boone's shrink, Decker, played by none other than David Cronenberg, betrays Boone and Boone gets gunned down. The cops unload a Looney Tunes cachet of small arms fire in the guy's torso. I'm surprised Wile E. Coyote-style bombs and anvils didn't fall on his head. Craig Sheffer's acting is consistently dramatic as he flounders, limbs a-flailing under the assault of enough munitions to reduce any human to lumpy pink paste. Every supporting character only reaffirms that our leads are absolute duds. Laurie, in her search for closure over Boone's death, meets Cheryl Ann. Cheryl Ann isn't exactly the most memorable character in the history of film, but she manages to be 100% more lively and interesting than Laurie. Laurie is the absence of a character. She's completely unrelatable. Cheryl Ann, for reasons that confound the living hell out of me, agrees to accompany Laurie on her pointless, boring quest to some abandoned cemetery. Midian feels like the society Burning Man participants dream of. The aesthetic is Gathering of the Juggalos meets Cirque du Soleil. The viewer can almost smell the sweltering tang of patchouli, hemp seed oil, and booty sweat through the screen. Not to diminish the art direction, though. The monstrous denizens of Midian are creatively ambitious, and each monster is unique and interesting to look at. The makeup applications allow the actors to really inhabit their roles. It's also obvious that Nightbreed, flawed as it may be, served as inspiration for a multitude of other works. Corey Taylor of Slipknot obviously drew inspiration, or plagiarism depending on your vernacular, from Decker's mask design. Nightcrawler from the second X-Men film could make himself right at home in Midian. For me, another notable parallel is Del Toro's Hellboy films. The rich color palette and bold creature design share common ground with cartoonist Mike Mignola and Guillermo del Toro's work. But Midian doesn't feel like an appealing place to live. I wish it were more oddly appealing. It's an unfair comparison, but the worlds of Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas and Corpse Bride got the formula right, while Nightbreed slightly misses the mark. The world of Midian is off putting. Its rules are rigorous. The monsters seem, well, monstrous. They're sympathetic characters, but you definitely don't want to hang out with them. They feel like smelly elitist hippies who are so married to their weird ideology that hanging out with them would be a total bummer. It's difficult to embrace the maybe humans are the real monsters idea when cannibalistic mutant bohemian demons are the alternative. The movie becomes an absolute labor to endure in its third act. As the locals assemble to go to war with Midian, one can't help but wonder if this is Clive Barker's indictment of America as a whole. The yokel law enforcement characters are all gun crazed, violent, bigoted extremists. They caress their firearms with a fetishism that's cartoonish. There's something so painfully tedious about the rhythm of this movie. We bounce to Midian, which is an unappealing place, then back to the dusty squalor of the surrounding town that's filled with hateful Southern stereotypes, then back to gross subterranean Midian. We've already established that our protagonist couple aren't that likable. There's simply no one to root for, so the encroaching war has no emotional heft. It's a battle between idiot shit kickers and nightmarish monsters who like to molest and eat people. I know this is harsh, but at this point in the movie, I wanted them all to die. Nightbreed is an interesting film in that it was written and directed by the same author who wrote the original novella. That's unheard of these days. Unfortunately, though, Nightbreed serves as a good example of what works on the page doesn't necessarily work on screen. I listened to the audiobook of Cabal in preparation for this review. Laurie and Boone's characters don't bother me in the book. They weren't particularly deep, well developed characters. You could almost criticize them for feeling flat and thinly conceived, but that's the magic of Barker's writing. He allows the reader to imprint themselves upon a character whose emotions could be considered contrary or even cold. But on screen, the tactic doesn't work. I feel like the actors who played the human characters weren't given much to chew on. Either that, or they just weren't that good at the craft of acting. Sorry. Nightbreed is a strange, conflicting experiment. I love it as much as I opposite of love it. It's often a labor to endure, but it's also worth the effort. The parts that are good are cinematic gold. The scene where the porcupine monster lady seduces her victims by jabbing them with horny inducing quills, that's signature Barker. It's such a fantastic, well crafted scene. It smacks of the weird Lovecraftian eroticism that's earned Clive Barker a legion of devoted fans. It's a good sign that a film is bitten off more than it can chew when the audience keeps thinking, oh, yeah, that's right. There's a murderous, psychopathic psychiatrist played by David friggin' Cronenberg. On paper, it's a winning formula. Within the movie, it becomes a plot device that consistently needs to be contended with. Cronenberg's character represents one of the many mixed emotions I have about Nightbreed. The premise of a psychiatrist manipulating and gaslighting his patient is brilliant, but that premise could have supported an entire movie on its own. Within the world of Nightbreed, where we're dealing with subterranean werewolf style monsters, it becomes oddly shoehorned in. For the director's cut of the film, the beginning and the end, especially the end, are the parts that are noticeably different. Are they better? I mean, not really. They represent an extension of the runtime. No amount of editing or post production trickery can fix what's so fundamentally flawed. Nightbreed represents a time in cinema that we may never recapture. It was a profoundly strange movie that somehow found its way to theaters. It was as broken as it was wildly successful. It was as inspired as it was at times a chore to endure. Some movies are just like that. They aren't easily recommended, but they're oddly required viewing if you truly love the art form. It's difficult to express how important Clive Barker is to us horror fans. He's a contemporary H.P. Lovecraft who gleefully embraced all the deviant perversities that prompted outrage during the 90s. As an irreverent teenager in search of twisted prose, I devoured his work. The man wielded profane magic, and I'll always be grateful for that. As an author, there are few equals. That doesn't mean his vision always translates well to the screen, and Nightbreed is a great example. It's tedious, bloated, poorly paced, and it's sometimes a painful experience to watch. It's a film that fails to live up to its premise and the sum of its parts, but it represents an era in cinema that we'll never see again. Okay, so we hope you've enjoyed our retrospective of Clive Barker's Nightbreed. If you did, chomp on that like button. If you want to see more movie reviews, comedy commentary, and other great horror content, subscribe to the Cinematic Suffering channel. Until next time, horror addicts.